Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I am the author of the Jazz Piano Fundamentals series. I am the author of solo standards for piano. These are arrangements that you can play that sound like the pianist that you love. And I'm the author of Playing Solo Jazz Piano. And this is probably the most relevant book today, not just because it matches this sweater perfectly, but also because I want to show you how I would form a solo piano arrangement for Fly Me to the Moon, one of the most requested songs on planet Earth. So, unless you live on another planet, you should pay attention to this video. So let's get into it. So I have this little sheet that I made that has the melody and chord symbols to Fly Me to the Moon. And there's so many ways that we could get started. But let's focus on a very traditional version where we're really feeling the groove, right? Because Fly Me to the Moon, we associate it with Sinatra, we associate it with swing, we associate it with big band, we associate it with dancing. And so I really want to feel that do 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 da, ba do 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 ba do do da, right? And so I'm gonna make sure I have a bass line, consistent bass line going in the left hand. And I'm going to start with the bass line in 2, meaning we're going to play half notes. So I'm going to use the root and the fifth, and I'm writing this an octave above where I would actually play it. So this is all going to be 8 VB, meaning we're playing it an octave below. Now, I started with the root to the fifth, and I could do the root to the fifth again in measure 2, but here's a little detail. The fifth is in the melody, so if I use the fifth in the bass, I'll have 2 A's. Not the end of the world, but hey, if I'm gonna sit here and take the time to write it all out, let's get those details right. So I'm using the root to the third, root fifth, root third, and then I'm gonna choose the root to the third again here, and again it's because of the note in the melody. Here we have a G natural in the melody, and that's gonna form a harmony against B, whereas it doesn't quite form a harmony against against D, the fifth, pardon me. And now, in this last measure, I'm gonna do a little half step targeting of the F major. And for those of you who know a little bit of jazz theory, we're gonna put in the tritone substitution of the dominant that would lead to F major. So C7 is the dominant that usually leads to F. G flat 7 is the tritone sub of that chord. And so that might come into play later. Let's finish this off. F, again, I'm gonna choose root third. I ended up doing a lot of root third because of those relationships with the melody. And maybe I'll do another tritone sub here for harmonization purposes. I'll replace that A7 with an E flat 7. Got lots of resources, videos out there on the tritone sub if that's not a concept you're familiar with. All right, so we've got this. Whenever I play, I'm ornamenting, I'm syncopating. So, if you play this literally as written, yours won't sound like mine. So, move some of these notes in the melody from the onbeat to the offbeat. Add some grace note scoops in here to give it some personality. When we play in jazz, everything has to have some personality. Now, we can actually hear the chords relatively decent without adding in anything at all, right? Because I've selected so nicely. I don't hear that and I think, boy, chords are really missing. But for the sake of argument, how would we add chords to this skeleton, this outline? Well, I would add them in the bottom of my right hand. really strategic, right? And this is so true about like anytime you play solo piano. It's not just a matter of I would like to play this voicing here. It doesn't necessarily work like that. You might be limited by the number of fingers that you have available, by the phrasing of the melody. So we have to be really strategic here. So, how would we tackle this? If I lengthen out that first note, then I could hit the third and the seventh of the chord. You hear how I'm doing that? And I am holding that note, and I'm using this kind of open-close motion of my hand, like the wrist rotation, in order to play that extra little comp. So I do something like that. And then same thing here. Now I've already got the third of the chord in the melody. So if I want to add a little bit more of the chord, maybe I'll put in the fifth and the seventh. And then on the G7, I've got the third, but it's quite high. So if I'm going to add more of the chord, I'd add the third and the seventh. And I think I have enough fingers that I could also add a little color. And now I've got a lot of time, so I can put in two comps here. And this is getting quite low, so I'm going to write it in the bass clef, but I'll be playing it with the right hand. So I've got the third and seventh, and then I'll add in an extra sixth, or you can call it a 13th, whatever you prefer, for just a little more color. And then I'm going to play the notes of this G flat 7 to add a little more color. So let's see. I'll make this bigger. I'll play it for you. Then I could do the same thing, and I'll go a little bit faster now. I could add certainly the third and the seventh. And you might say, well, before you said the third's in the melody, so you don't need it again. But here the third's pretty high up, and we like to hear the third in what I call the magic range, which is between G and C. And that A is just barely outside the magic range, so maybe it's a judgment call, but I do like adding it in the middle. So here's a time when the third of the chord is clearly within that magic range. And so I don't really want to double it. It's already where we need it to be. So I'm going to add the seventh, and then this is the fifth. It's the flat fifth because it's the half diminished chord. And then this could be kind of fun. Because I can play both of these notes with my thumb alone, I'm going to add an A and a B here, which kind of completes the chord, and it only takes me one finger. So here again, we're right on the border of that magic range. So maybe I'll add D, C, and G sharp below. So I am going to double that third. Trying to play with a pen in my hand doesn't work very well. To make this all flow together, I might make that C sharp a half note so that it comes in with the rest of the chord. And I'll have, I know it's hard to read ledger lines, C sharp, A, and G here. So I'm going to have the third, the seventh, and then a nice little altered tone, the sharp 11th for that E flat 7. That'll all come in. That'll all come in at once. All right, so here's our first 8 bars now. I'm going to let you in a little secret of one other way that I'm implying the harmony, which is that I'm using ghost tones in some of these melody notes, melody lines. And those help to fill in some of that empty sonic space. Ghost notes, these are these notes that aren't really supposed to be heard as part of the melody, but they give a little bit of rhythmic value. They give a little bit of a percussive effect. So, right, I don't want people hearing. I want it. So. This would be another great place to add a ghost note, or I might just add that as a full-fledged note. Okay, I do want to show you how I would arrange this second ending, because it's first ending, because it's very different. There's a lot of space here. I could continue on a similar track, but for pedagogical sake, let's do it a little different. And with this space, I want to think about call and response. So just think about how I want to do these details. There's so many different ways to do this. So we're coming out of So what I want to do is I'm going to have this melody be basically unaccompanied. If you can reach this, it's nice to do a little tenth here. And then we'll have the response. 2, 3, ba-do-do. So, really the most melodic thing in the response is going to be the bass. But now the right hand's coming and it's taking over the chord roll. And so again, that melody is going to be, this time it's really going to be totally unaccompanied. And then I'm going to have this nice little bit. This is called the count bassy rhythm. 1, 2, da, da, ah. Because it's that, like his ending of Fly Me to the Moon. Sorry, I'm going to do this. And then, in order to be just a little bit more sophisticated here, I'm going to have this little melody coming down, starting at E flat, or D sharp if you prefer, and then going down chromatically. E flat, D, C sharp. And then we could do the exact same thing for the... because we actually don't even need to hold a chord here. We can just let that go. But in terms of the response, the second time we can do the same thing. And this voicing I have here, I know, again, it's a lot of ledger lines. E, B, and F. 7th, 3rd, 13th. going to skip the C major measure for a second so I can focus on this measure. Do, do, do. So I'm just writing kind of a basic B half diminished. What notes are these? These are F, A, B. Here's a D down here. Here's a B. So we're really just having the root, third, flat fifth, seventh, and then B flat, and it should probably I'll make it A sharp and G sharp. A sharp right next to a G sharp. So that's going to be the sharp 11 and the third of the E7. And then I'll have the third and the seventh down here. And you might say, well, what about the flat ninth? It's in the chord. That just means if there's a ninth, it should be flat. It doesn't mean you have to play the flat ninth. Yeah, really nice and simple, to the point. And let's harmonize this with a B diminished over C leading to C major for a little bit of color. That's going to be really nice, right? That B diminished is acting kind of like a G7 flat 9, right? Basically the same chord, and putting it over the C just makes it so much more colorful. So let's play these 8 bars now. Good. So the changes I want to make to my score, these guys should be AVB. And then if you can play this lower, that E lower, that's going to be really nice. It might actually be nicer to have a little bit of a taste of that D minor chord here. All right, let's hear this whole thing together. So we're going to go from a little bass line to call and response. I mean, everything sounds a little bit different in context, right? Once you start playing, it's like, oh, I want to ease that. I want to smooth over that transition this way. I want to add a little bit more of this kind of rhythm. I want to add a little bit more of that. But just to review a few of the things that we did here. So first of all, we started with a bass in 2, right? Half notes. And we were looking for notes that were going to harmonize with the melody beautifully. Then, in order to make the harmony even a little clearer, we lengthened out some melody notes and added some little punches, mostly trying to hit the thirds and sevenths of the chord and anywhere else that we could add some color while using a very small number of fingers, while making it really nice and comfortable for our hands. And then in the second half, we got into this call and response thing where there was really no accompaniment or just a held accompaniment going on during the melody. And then a little response, both hands, trying to create a little bit of motion, a little bit of interest. We used the count Basie rhythm. We used this diminished chord in order to create a little bit more color. All right, I know that was a little bit of a whirlwind, but hopefully that starts giving you some arranging ideas of how you could take a standard, Fly Me to the Moon or another one, and arrange it and make it sound really nice for solo piano. If you want way more arranging ideas or just to go through it much more slowly, check out this book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano. You can grab it at jeremysiskind.com or Amazon or wherever the finest of books are sold. And if you made it this far, why don't you name your favorite planet, since we are talking about the moon, which I realize is it a planet? I think it is. It's a celestial body. It's a satellite. Maybe it's a planet as well. Anyway, I will ponder that, and I'll leave you to it. Bye-bye.